So the tournament is now over. Earlier, about an hour ago, I finished my final round game, round 9 against Vaibhav Raut from India. And it was a fun final round. Let's get into it. I woke up this morning and I wanted to go back to sleep, but it was a 10 a.m. round, so I couldn't really sleep in. And I decided to stick with my main repertoire, played the London Opening, and I did a little bit of preparation last night. I was actually preparing a really, really cool, crazy line that unfortunately we didn't go into, but I'll just share it just to give a sense of how fun the prep could have been. As I saw my opponent plays this move a lot online, and like usually goes for Queen's Indian setup, b6 on move 2. And I was going to play knight c3 going into Jobava London, and after bishop b7, I was actually preparing a novelty in this position, pawn h4, which is one of the top engine moves. And the idea is to get a very quick h5, h6. But unfortunately, we didn't go into this, and we actually went for a way more standard variation. So I'll have to save this for a future opponent. But yeah, after bishop f4, my opponent played d5. And we actually got a line that I like to play myself as black after takes, takes, and bishop f5. This is a really solid, reputable line, and my opponent played this pretty quickly, so I assumed that he had prepared this specifically for me. Now, the move I've been playing most recently, especially in online games, is bishop to b5, and this is considered to be the most venomous move. And there's a common trap here that a lot of players fall into. If black just plays naturally e6, white can play knight e5, rook c8, and then all of a sudden, after takes, takes bishop a6, white is winning the exchange. Now, my opponent definitely would not have gone into this, but just to show, let me share my my online games. I've had this position 11 times online, and okay, I don't win every single time, but this is considered to already be very good for white. So rather than going for bishop to b5, I should explain the reason why I didn't go for bishop b5 is if black's prepared, it can get really messy. Like one of the main lines is queen b6, and then something like c4 takes a4. And I was vaguely remembering some game from the Olympiad. I think it was Fabiano Caruana against one of the players from Uzbekistan. And Fabiano actually lost as white in a similar line where his opponent played bishop d3. And the lines just weren't fresh in my head, so I figured I would just avoid this line entirely. And actually, after the game, my opponent told me he had prepared exactly what Fabiano's opponent played against him in Olympiad. So I think I made a decent choice, not going for the sharper line, but going for a more solid positional line. What happened to the notation? C3. Yeah, c3 was played. So c3 is, I think, the most popular move, and it's a way that white's handled this position for many, many years. If you check out the games and database. And after pawn e6, I decided to play very solidly bishop to e2. Now, there is a line here, queen b3, which I would usually be happy to enter from the black side. There's a cool gambit, bishop d6, black sacrifices a pawn, and then gets this position where it's very, very dangerous to play as white, especially if you're not prepared. And I would have more preparation here from the black side. So I opted for bishop e2, and it leads to a bit more quiet positional game, but still chances for white to play for some sort of edge. Even though it doesn't look too impressive, we both complete development, and I play a very typical positional move here, pawn a4, just discouraging any potential for black's minority attack. And yeah, if black wants to play a6, I can maybe even play a5 and clamp down on the queen side. So I was feeling good here. I barely used any time off my clock, and my opponent was already taking time pretty early on. Spent over 10 minutes to play rook a c8. And one of the things about this position is it's not so easy to find a plan for black. Like, even though the pieces are pretty much fully optimized, it's not clear what to do next. And as white, I had a general sense of what I'm doing. I played bishop to f1, going for some knight e5 potential, but also just kind of waiting to see what black is up to. He plays knight e4. Now I play rook to e3. And this is the typical move, some potential to rook lift later on and get some kingside attack. So we do trade knights, takes, and bishop to e4. So opponent's going for some simplification. And here I just offer the trade of bishops. We trade, still very peaceful, some more liquidation. Now knight a5. And I do have to be careful of the potential of knight b3 or knight c4. And in this position, I played just kind of preparatory move, rook e2, ensuring that the pawn is going to be defended and knight c4 won't come to attack the rook. It seems like I lost a little bit of time moving the rook twice, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it matters too much. And the knight is arguably a little bit out of play, which is why, of course, knight c4 was played. And in this position, I went for kind of a strange looking move, but there is a common positional maneuver, especially for this structure, is that this knight is generally best placed on d3. And the way to get there, or one way to get there, is via e1. So I play knight e1, looks very strange, but it's not necessarily about where I am currently, it's about where I'm going. And I want to get to d3, where the knight will be even more centralized and also hold on to the b2 pawn. So opponent plays queen b6, I defend the b pawn, and now knight a5 back. I should explain here, my opponent set up a sneaky trap. If I play knight d3 too soon, then there's knight b3, forking the rook and hitting the pawn. And then wherever the rook moves, knight takes d4 is a pork, combining the pin and the fork, and I'd be losing material here. So rook a3, I'm doing even more contortions. Looks like my pieces, it reminds me of a contortionist trying to fit inside like a small box, but very soon I end up untangling. First with knight d3, then queen d1. I wanted to get the queen eventually to the king side. Queen d6, I move my rook back. And even though it seems like I've spent a lot of time just kind of dancing around, I am making steady improvements because now the queen is ready to come in. And these pieces, they look nice, but what are they actually doing? The structure, along with the knight, is super, super solid. Queen d8, queen f3. Now, I should note, maybe a little bit before this point, I'm sure people have noticed the timestamps are no longer here. All the games in the Lee Chess broadcast just stopped transmitting moves. So unfortunately, we don't have the timestamps, but I do have the full game, and that's what matters. And I do vaguely remember the time situation. My opponent was already getting like really low on time, probably below 10 minutes at this point, and I still had over 30 minutes. So time was very nice, but the position is still very much a fight. Queen g5 played. I improve my rooks, and after queen f5, I did not want to trade queens. I'm definitely playing for more than just an equal endgame, so I play queen e3, rook e7, and yeah, at this point my opponent I think was already below a minute. Like so much time was spent in the middle game for my opponent, like just trying to figure out what to do, and I was feeling really, really good here. Played rook to d1. Point being, I'm over defending the knight, so my queen is not completely tied down. And I had a cool idea with rook d1, which we're going to see very soon. Is after queen e4, queen d2, knight c4, counterattacking my queen. So again, kind of offering a queen trade. But I don't want to trade queens. I play queen e1, queen h4, and now I play knight b4. And I was really happy to come up with this idea because this is a multi-purpose move. Not only do I have the simple threat of taking on d5, exploiting the pinned e-pawn, but I'm also preparing the rook lift. And this was one reason for rook d1 earlier, is to eventually get the rook to align with black's king. So my opponent, around this point, my opponent was playing almost every move with less than 10 seconds left. Now there was a 30-second increment, so he was basically living on increment, but I tried to keep the tempo, played rook d3, queen d8, and rook g3. So gradually making progress. The rook has found its way to g3, and now this is probably a good time to advertise my merch. I do have a new design, and yeah, you can get your Do You Even Rook Lift Bro tank top at merch.iamrosen.com and show off your amazing muscular rook and maybe show off your guns as well. But let's get back to the game. I did execute the beautiful rook lift. Now, I wasn't wearing the rook lift tank top during the game, but maybe I should have been. It was a nice moment to be showing off my muscular rook. But anyway, the game continued, knight d6, and I repositioned my knight back into the center. Knight f5, rook f3, and queen g5. So the pressure is gradually building up. I play rook to f4, and this is actually yet another rook lift because black is controlling the g3 square. I wanted to eventually play rook g4, and very soon I was able to accomplish that. F3, defending the mate threat, opening up the queen, and preparing rook g4. This is a nice multi-purpose move. And here black has really nothing better than to just retreat, after which I play rook g4, queen f6, and now h4. And yeah, my opponent was still very low on time. I probably had like 10 to 15 minutes at this point, and queen d8 was played, with my opponent having just over 30 seconds left on the clock. So in this position, I realized it's a critical moment because there is potential to sacrifice and transform the position entirely. And the key move I was calculating is rook takes e6. And it's a move that looks very promising at first, but it requires also concrete calculation. So I spent about maybe 4 or 5 minutes before taking on e6, and I decided that now's the time to go all in. And after takes rook to f7, what I initially calculated is that I can just take with a rook and prepare knight e5, and I have 2 pawns for the exchange, and it should be very, very good for black because the queen is tied down to the rook on c8. And I went ahead and played rook takes g6, but I completely overlooked black's next move, rook c6. And I think just because my opponent was so low on time and I was trying to use the clock as a weapon, I was also just tired given it was the final round, the morning round. This move completely escaped me, and I realized that, uh-oh, black is simplifying. And after I move my queen, takes, my h-pawn hangs. And now it's not so clear if I can even play for a win, and there's even the risk of being worse here. Now, one move I can still play is knight e5, but this would just walk into perpetual check. Maybe black could even play some rook f6 as well. So I didn't go for knight e5, but I went for queen to e6. I was still trying to play for a win, threatening to take the pawn on d5. So black retreats to e7, and this was a very nice move for black because now if I take on d5, I'm losing the knight after queen to e3. If I block with the knight, there's queen e1, and this is losing for white. So I had seen I can't take on d5, and I played the move that I thought still gave me some winning chances, is queen e5. But at this point, we're both getting really low on time. And after takes, I'm still down the exchange. I only have a pawn for it, and things are simplifying quickly. And they've actually simplified in black's favor, given that now the rook is ready to come in to c4, and I might already be just much worse here. Realizing that there's not a great way to cover all the pawns on the queen side. Also, the king is ready to come in. So I decided to play king f2. And the move I was scared of here is rook to c4, after which I think black is winning a pawn. If I play a5, there's rook a4. And if we went into this, I was going to play king e3, takes, and king d4. But I'm pretty sure black is the only one that can win this position, given that I no longer even have a pawn for the exchange. And very soon, like if I ever play b4, there's going to be rook a2, and the king is still ready to come in, maybe in combination with the kingside pawns rolling. But we didn't go into this. Instead, my opponent played king f7, which I think is also a very fine move. And then I played king to e3, and I decided to offer a draw here, realizing that it's very, very difficult to still play for a win, and I'm probably about to be much worse. And I was not expecting my opponent to take the draw, and he started thinking for it's almost the whole remainder of his time. I mean, he had like 40 seconds left. He got down to 12 seconds, and then he paused the clock and accepted my draw offer. And that was a game. Somewhat unexpected finish. Some moment in the game, I thought I was going to be pretty easily winning. And then the final position, I think I was very close to just being lost. So I think a draw is a fair result. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about this game. But I guess I can't complain too much given that I could have easily lost it. And kudos to my opponent for fighting very well with just such low time in the later stages of the game. So that's the tournament. Tournament's over. I finished with 4 out of 9. I think overall it was a normal result. Maybe I lost like a couple rating points, but that's not really why I'm competing. I don't really care too much about rating. I think I had a lot of fun, interesting, instructive games. I want to give a big thanks to those of you who've been watching the recaps and offering your comments and feedback and questions. It's been super fun to play the tournament in Abu Dhabi. The conditions were amazing. Hotel was nice. Everyone who I've met here was very nice as well. And I'd love to return for next year if possible. I could probably talk a lot more about various things over the event, and maybe I'll make like one final conclusion video. But I'm tired, and I have not streamed live in over a week since before the tournament began. So if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to check out my Twitch channel. It's very possible that if you're watching this sometime in the future, I might be live in the present moment, at least your present moment. So anyway, thanks again, and stay tuned for more, maybe slightly different YouTube content in the near future. Goodbye.